Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk for the month of June 2022. My name is George Ferrari, and I serve as CEO of your community foundation. We are very excited to be having as our guest Karen Yearwood, who is one of the co-chairs of the Reimagining Public Safety Project. And this will be our topic for today. Let's Talk gatherings look at information and conversation and questions about important issues in our mission-driven sector and in our community, hoping to help guide your philanthropy and your community action. We have some additional programs scheduled for the remainder of the summer. Next month, July 12th, we'll have folks from Planned Parenthood to talk about sexual and reproductive rights. And on August 9th, we'll have Jordan Clemens from Unbroken Promise Initiative to talk about grassroots action. All of our Let's Talk videos and PowerPoints are archived on our website. I do need to let you know that today we discovered that we have a broken link on that archive. We're going to fix that before the end of the day. But if you were to look at it right now, it tends you to a slightly odd place. So I just wanted to kind of let you know that. We will have time for some questions toward the end. And Janet Kutracha and Madeline Rosas from the Community Foundation staff will be managing that process. And you can put those in the chat. If you leave your microphone on mute, that helps us eliminate background noise and helps us have some better audio. So for today, I'm very much liking to welcome Karen Yearwood. As I mentioned, Karen is one of the co-chairs of the Reimagining Public Safety project, and she, along with her family, has lived in Ithaca for 17 years. Karen currently works at Cornell Cooperative Extension, Tompkins County. She has also served as the second executive director of the village at Ithaca and has volunteered extensively in our community. She was recently elected as a school board member of the Ithaca City School District, and her term will start on July 1st. So clearly a involved community activist and member to help us understand some very important issues today. Karen co-chairs Reimagining Public Safety along with Eric Rosario, and they were co-leads of the Reimagining Public Safety Working Group for the City of Ithaca's recommendation. So Karen, I will turn it over to you. And anytime folks have questions or comments, you can put those in the chat box. And Karen has a PowerPoint for us as well. Welcome and thank you for making time to be with us today, Karen.
Well, thank you, George, and thank you for that introduction, and welcome to everyone. It's so good to see so many different names of people joining this day. I know you could be out in the sunshine and you've chosen to be here with us. So I truly am grateful and appreciative of that as we continue to be community members involved in this whole initiative. So I'll start this. So I just wanted to start first of reminding people about the Reimagining Public Safety, the recommendations which were presented to Common Council in March and still requires community involvement, and on our publicsafetyreimagined.org website. And we'll put that in the chat at some time too. And in Article 3 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it talks about that Article 3 states that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. So this is clearly stating that public safety is a basic human right for all of us. And as a result of the New York State Executive Order 203 by the then governor of New York State in 2020, that this all evolved and came about. And the executive order was in place due to the murder of George Floyd. And looking at and stated in the executive order, reviewed the long and painful history in New York State of discrimination and mistreatment of the Black and Brown community. And the executive order stated for municipalities to just come up with a plan and to make sure it's community-centric. And so this all started with that Executive Order 203 to just build the public's confidence and trust in the system of law enforcement and criminal justice. And with that, there was a focus group for the first phase. We had different community groups meet to discuss their concerns and the issues on law enforcement. And the charge that was given to, it was a combination of the city of Ithaca and the Tompkins County, and they came up with 19 recommendations. And Monalita Smiley is here. She's the director of the Community Justice Center, and she takes care of and is involved in most of those recommendations, because there's one that's city-centric and there's some that are community-centric, Tompkins County-centric, in a combination for the 19. But this working group that Eric Rosario and I co-led, was focused on recommendation 1. And with that recommendation, it was to name a department, a new Department of Public Safety, to include the current IPD, the Ithaca Police Department, and to have unarmed as well as armed officers as part of this new department. The good thing about the working group is that it comprised of about 15, 16 individuals. 3 of them were IPD staff, Ithaca Police Department staff. 1 member was a detective and the other 2 officers. And so I continue to hear questions about, was the police department ever involved in this? Yes, they were involved from the beginning. They were involved from 2020 and 2021 when everyone provided some input into this combination, Tompkins County and city recommendations. There were 3 alderpersons involved in the working group, as well as interested residents and outside experts. We had people representing the colleges and the local college and university. We had students from IC and Cornell. We had staff member. We had community members who had lived experience too. There's a quote in the report, and the report is accessible on the website as well as there are hard copies around. And it says that for too long, marginalized and vulnerable communities in the city of Ithaca have lived without the true sense of peace and safety we all are promised. Those same communities, along with allies from every facet of our community, have been asking and working for a change to the city's over-reliance on police to resolve non-criminal or non-violent public safety. So this working group was tasked with looking at different ways to resolve the non-criminal or non-violent public safety to ensure public safety for all. So that's why the working group was community-centered, and that was a crucial part of this. And it was data-driven, and from the beginning, IPD was involved and we heard from IPD to address like staffing issues, officer wellness, shift design, and a few other areas. In our working group, we extended the invitation to subcommittee members, there were technical advisors, and we worked with Center for Police and Equity, which is a nonprofit that is designed to uplift the voice of communities pursuing more equitable public safety systems. So they provided public project management facilitation. And we work with technical advisors locally too. The Department of Emergency Response, Michael Steitley, was extremely helpful. And there's been talk at times that some of the technical advisors were not involved in recommendation 1, but there was an onboarding process, a 2-day onboarding process for technical advisors where the recommendation 1 is just one of the 19 recommendations, and they were involved, and will continue to be involved in all of the future 19 recommendations, which is an ongoing process. So this was the structure that was designed and came up, and the department structure, which was community-centric, and we heard from the community through the website the name in the Department of Community Safety. So that was in the recommendation. And that suggestion was weighed in by the complete working group to decide and put forth that recommendation to the public. So we benchmarked against other communities, and this was responsive to our community needs to have a division of police and a division of community solutions. And I know that since I was asked to present some months ago, a lot has transpired since then. And this is the PowerPoint that we've used to present what the recommendations were outlined in for recommendation 1. And it continues to be under discussion within Common Council, and as well as still, we want to hear feedback from the community. And we went through an exercise in subcommittees as well as a working group as a whole to go through several call delineation types. And I know the community have questioned this, that why are there only 5 unarmed responders and so many call types that have gone into like It Depends or the Division of Community Solutions. And this is allowing the IPD to continue to do their investigative work around any criminal pursuits and all. And for unarmed officers and or community responders, as it's suggested, to look at like property check, things that you normally don't need an armed officer to attend to. And we reviewed the data provided by IPD and what's happening in Ithaca with the expertise of the dispatch office to see, well, how best can we divide up some of these call types to, It Depends could be like an alternative model. And so we heard from the current IPD staff, as well as the data and the expertise of the individuals with lived experience and how they've interacted with police. But this is just a placeholder, it's a starting point. And knowing that the city attorney, as well as everyone else involved, would have to look at the plans and look at New York State law to see who can best and who is more suited for their within their position to actually do the call types and address the call types as outlined here. This is another quote that's in the report, and this is from the Center for American Progress. And they did a report on the community responder model, and their focus, the Center for American Progress focuses on developing and supporting policies to end unjust punishment. So that's why the It Depends category was noted, because at times there was one officer that commented that they felt uncomfortable approaching someone within when EMS was called, as well as fire was called, that they were not comfortable with the situation, that it wasn't, no one was in danger or harm, but it wasn't really called for, that needed an armed responder at that time. Therefore, that's why we came up with this model with the unarmed responders. And so detailed in the report, we had subcommittees to go through staffing, training, equipment. We heard from police officers about shift assignments and sometimes not being able to plan in advance for if they needed to be off for family events. We heard from them about officer wellness. So we've addressed all of that within the recommendations. There's assignments of beats to increase community engagement, because that's where the trust is developing. Then where we would identify services where most needed. Training, we had a subcommittee on training, and we looked at a community-centered model and prioritizing community protection through de-escalation tactics. And there would be alternatives to use of force and trauma-informed approaches and mental health awareness, as well as data collection. We're a town where we have 3 higher ed resources: Tompkins County Community College, which is TC3, Ithaca College, and Cornell University. So we've outlined that we need to utilize them more where it talks about law enforcement ideas. In the recommendation, we supported the officers have like 10 hours of paid service as they're going through the patrol, to connect with the community, and in doing this to build trust. There's a records management system, which a method of looking at low priority occurrences and to improve with that, but to constantly evaluate the progress of this whole initiative, knowing that it doesn't just end once it's voted on. But community involvement is definitely still needed, and for feedback to be provided. And the budget of all of this was budget that we came up with in our budget subcommittee was 1.15 million, knowing that IPD's current 2022 budget is 12.8 million, and the city's current 2022 budget is 84 million. So this was an initial budget, and to be spent over multiple years as this whole department is being designed and developed, and knowing that a commissioner, which is civilian, would be in charge. That's where our recommendation was put forth. And then so as we continue from March until now and what's next, there's still the website for continued community feedback and involvement. 19 recommendations, as I stated, is listed. This was just a working group focused on recommendation 1, and the working group was not designed to just continue beyond the recommendations as set forth. And they're frequently asked questions on the website, and I would encourage our community to continue to check the frequently asked questions, because some of the questions that are coming up is definitely answered there. We know there's a lot happening where this within the city, even about the ethics investigation. I'm not going into that now, but it's just to be more aware and speak with your alderperson, because to find out more information about the Reimagining public safety, as well as whatever your feedback is. We did Q&A sessions. There's been town halls and a host of other areas that we've talked about. The report is still available on publicsafetyreimagined.org. So just continue the discussion. And as I started out before, how I would encourage us to continue having the discussions and like conversations like this too, to just garnish more community feedback and input. This was a process that went longer than originally had planned, because there was such a wealth of information that we had to delve through and decipher and go through and get a better understanding of. And we looked at other communities and what they were doing and designed a rubrics around what we needed to address for this community. And then this is our last quote, that how Eric and I both stated how we care deeply for the city and that we believe in this people, and we put forward this plan with conviction that if approved, it will provide a more expansive, exclusive, and effective public safety reality for every one of us. Thank you.
Karen, thank you very much. I want to encourage folks to put questions in the chat. We have a couple of questions from your registration, and I have one question to start off, and then I'll turn it over to Janet and or Madeline, who are monitoring the questions. You talked about this being a city-county process. I think the new concept of new department is city-based. What can you tell us about how this will impact any planning going on at the county level? And that may not be something that you know as much about, but I'm just trying to get that clearer in my head.
Right. So when the recommendations were put forth, each municipality was asked for, as a result of Executive Order 203, to put forth a recommendation on reimagining. It was the county provided some, the city provided some, and there's a combination, a total of 19 recommendations. Now, this one where the working group focused on is just recommendation 1, which was a city-specific recommendation that stated about having an unarmed and armed Department of Public Safety. Mona Lisa Smalley, who's the director of the Community Justice Center, would be able to delve into more as to the Tompkins County recommendations. And one of them have been recently addressed. I know that community healing, and there's been community healing sessions that are happening, as well as the Sheriff's Department having a pilot program was one of the county-specific recommendations.
Thank you. These issues are so big and so important. We might be in contact with you, Mona Lisa, soon to schedule your own time for a Let's Talk, so we give this enough time over time as these things develop. Janet or Madeline, do you have questions that you want to share?
I have a question. Somebody's inquiring about how does an active domestic violence situation fall into your chart, into response to those situations?
Right. So when we heard from the Department of Emergency Response, just like child abuse fell into that. And Michael Steitley, who's the director of the Department of Emergency Response, he was going through what dispatch goes through the process. If there is any situation where, like in child abuse, if the child is in physical danger, CPS is called immediately. It doesn't even go through that regular channels of dispatch. And just like with the way the domestic violence and child abuse was defined, it was not a physical harm to the individual, because there are different categories of the call types and different levels. So they know at doer which ones which would require an unarmed or an armed officer. So that's why it's in the it depends category. Just like an alternate response was that happened during COVID, was a bike being stolen. So that was able to go through over a telephone call instead of a police officer going present in person to attend to that call.
Thanks. Madeline?
Yes, we have a question from Valerie in our group chat. How many other cities and counties are using this concept?
Oh, several others. I don't have the number offhand, but the Center for Police and for Police and Awareness, that they have they've done community responders model. There's Cahoots, which we've looked at in Eugene, Oregon, that do community responders. And where a few cities that are doing it, they've had good results and being receptive and able to identify call types which do not require an armed officer.
Thank you.
Karen, can you share about plans for expanded foot patrols in the West End?
I'm not in the position to share about that at this point, because I'm not involved in the next phase in this. This has to go through Common Council, and they have to be in discussion with IPD as to what they would do about beat designs and if they want to follow this model. I know that some have said that we haven't gone too far, or some may have said we've gone far enough. And it's just a matter of looking at what's needed within our area and the different wards, and how can we best provide the public safety within our area of Ithaca.
Thanks.
Jan has a question. What were the most common objectives that came to the planning committee regarding this model of community safety?
Well, last fall, around October, November, we did a focus group in person with the unhoused community. And we were able to gather them together and just to get feedback. And they'd said that that they believe that we need police officers, and we had to reassure them we were not saying that we're defunding or anything of that, because that was totally not part of our language even within the recommendations which went to vote at Common Council as well as Tompkins County Legislature. And they said that they believe this police need to be around, but they asked that better training. They said the approach of police and common, especially we heard from quite a few of Black, Brown community members, and who stated that the approach of police needs to be different if we could provide additional training. So that's why that is a lot outlined within the recommendations. And even there was discussion about, for some of the alternative responses, do we always have to use weapons, or what do we do about unarmed officers? More of those individuals patrolling with the police officers who might be armed.
Karen, I have a question about asking if you could share a little more about how the non-armed responders would have adequate training, staffing, and resources to address communities' needs, and how you feel assured that we're not sort of setting up a plan that risks failing.
Mhm. Well, because the plan has to be evaluated throughout each process. It has to be outlined. And this is where, if it's common council or working or a different task force with the group, we recommended a commissioner to be hired as part of this process. So, and we've addressed like the whole staffing issue. So those who have the knowledge and the law enforcement knowledge would actually go through and design the complete plan, like for the next year, for the next 2 years, and how we're going to meet the needs of what was requested. So if and the staffing has to be evaluated depending on the number of calls that we receive, and that's with I know that Department of Emergency Response, Michael Steitley, said that he meets on a regular basis with the fire department and with EMS, and to include the IPD and this Department of Community Safety to just meet and just assess, well, how many calls are we receiving versus what is the personnel? And it's not to minimize it, but it's just like staffing at your fast food places like Dunkin' Donuts or Burger King. You have to see when you have your large number of customers coming in and how much staff do you put on duty at that time. So that whole ongoing assessment needs to be done.
Okay. Can we have one question from Phoebe? Can we talk about why there have been a pushback from some community members?
That's an interesting question. And we could definitely have the conversations because it's if and we just need to continue to have the conversations with your respective alderperson. And sometimes I'm not sure why there is pushback, but I know that both Eric and I have always stated that we stand behind the plan and the recommendations as outlined, because we've heard from police officers about officer wellness. So we wanted to address that. We heard from the community about training. So we wanted to address that. So it's been identified in the recommendations. And sometimes it's been, some individuals may not have read it in depth. The actual printed report is about 40 pages long. There's more information in the online version, which has the appendices and it goes through the data. If whether or not we're data geeks, it's just to look through what was reviewed here, given the data that we received and with the data company that we worked with. So just reviewing that and seeing what is needed for Ithaca. We looked at other things outside, but we also designed this, seeing what is needed for Ithaca.
I just placed in the chat a link to the Common Council's website with contact information for your Common Councilors. I have universally found folks who serve on Common Council incredibly available, open to listening and open to contact. So my two counselors, Phoebe and Duxon, I think are on this call, living in the best ward in the city here. And I really appreciate the openness to dialogue and conversation. These are important issues that we're working on. They're not going to be solved overnight. We do know the current conditions before any of the executive order of this study were not satisfying, were dangerous to communities, did harm to communities. So we can't allow the status quo to exist. So I appreciate that that there's been a lot of effort at working on this, knowing it's not a perfect process, it's an iterative process, and it's one that people have certain anxieties about, but also a lot of hope and aspirations for fixing things that have been long broken and long inadequate. We're coming up the end of our time together. These Let's Talks are happening every month. We thank you for making time to be this. Karen Yearwood, thank you so much. We will have this archived on our website along with your PowerPoint. This is the beginning and continuing conversation. It's not the end. I do want to let you know we have 2 more scheduled for the summer. Our July 12th Let's Talk will be with folks from Planned Parenthood talking about sexual and reproductive rights. And on August 9th, Jordan Clemens from Unbroken Promise Initiatives will talk about grassroots action. Some of you who may not have had the chance to be at our annual meeting meeting last week knew that we were making a major announcement at the meeting. I will share with you what that announcement was here because I was asked about it during the Zoom. The Community Foundation redid our strategic plan centering diversity, equity, inclusion, and racial justice in all of our practices, policies, grant making, and community work. And we have some we've reworked our mission statement as well. One of the major results of that is that last week we have brought on to our staff Gloria Kwaku, who is our brand new person in the role of Chief Inclusion and Community Engagement Officer. So you will begin to see a new reorientation for the Community Foundation and all of our work to center diversity, equity, inclusion, and racial justice, to listen and engage with communities that may have felt unheard and unseen, and to continue to develop our understanding of how we can serve you at the Community Foundation. So I'd ask you to join me in welcoming Gloria to our staff, and we're so excited about this new opportunity in our community. That was our big announcement. Thank you again for being part of our community, for being engaged, for caring, for handling and tackling difficult questions and challenges like reimagining public safety. We will do this together and we will make things better. And I appreciate all of your time today. Thank you so much.